Hello everyone, welcome back. Good to see you all. And our next lecture here is going to be, as you can see, on Michael Collins and the intelligence war. And there's this contrast we get. As I say, in Provincial Ireland, it looks a lot like a guerrilla war. There's ambushes laid and so on, and groups of men, out in the countryside and, carrying out shootings and so on, and, blocking roads and cutting telegraph wires. A typical kind of, rural guerrilla war. But in Dublin, even though you do have the Dublin Brigade, and they are themselves carrying out rather vigorous attacks, it's notable particularly this other kind of theatre of the war revolves around what we might call the intelligence war, and Michael Collins's famous involvement of this. What Collins will do is something very different, and that's why it's worth just talking about. The character of what he's doing is he has a small band of elite hand-picked volunteers now, and what he's doing is far more like sort of spy work, this sort of covert intelligence war that he has with the British security forces. And we're just going to unpick some of that to talk about his kind of role in this whole thing. Here's a bit of background on Collins. I'll show you here, just so you can see. There he is, young Collins. As I say, he's born in West Cork, and a lower middle class family, which is that strata of the lower middle class, upper working class. That is the strata from which the IRA are all drawn. The Fenians have been drawn from that. It's always that. You never get the kind of wealthier farmers involved in the IRA. But certainly these, I'd say, kind of school teachers and publicans and the sons of farmers and these kind of people, that's where it comes from. Collins himself, of course, spends a long time in London, where he goes to work. He was sort of a decade in London, and then comes back, of course, to take part in the Easter Rising and get involved in various sort of advanced nationalist organisations in London, the London branches of them. And comes back, takes part in the Rising, and we've talked about kind of what happens to him then. And if you remember what happens to Collins, is everyone else goes back to their hometowns and stuff, and expecting a kind of hero's welcome, and many of them get them little, wow, it's the guy who was interned, he was in the Rising, he knew Patrick Pearse and so on. Collins goes back, and he's just, no one cares, and I think he's a bit annoyed by this, and then goes back to Dublin, and he spends his time in Dublin now with his various fingers in pies. As we say, he's in the Dáil, he's the Minister of Finance, he's head of the IRB, of course, as well. But this will be his role, particularly during the war, as Director of Intelligence of the IRA. And he's very good at this. We've mentioned, I say, he's a man with a black book. He knows people who know people. He knows, that he is a born kind of spy master kind of figure. And what Collins is doing is absolutely vital, because Collins is looking in Dublin to undermine the notoriously well-coordinated intelligence gathering capabilities of the Crown Forces. And what they do is, through a combination of paid informers and these local police who compile these reports from the provinces, they have huge files now on all of these areas and all the prominent individuals within them. And I say, we've mentioned this, in South Tipperary, all you really need to know are the 20 guys, as it were, who are the real, scary, hardcore killers. And if you can put them out of action, you really, activity in these places will collapse. And the way this works with the RIC, which is another reason the RIC are being targeted, of course, is in the local area, as he said, they know everybody and they know everything. And what they do is, whenever they witness anything which they consider to be political, in inverted commas, in nature, rather than just ordinary crime, they have a separate form they fill in. So, we saw some men marching about in a field or something, or, there were gunshots heard here, or we found out there was a weapon found, or there's rumours. They just compile all that information at the end of the week and send it off to Dublin, to the Dublin G Division, which is the political division of the Dublin Metropolitan Police, and they compile it, put it in the South Tipperary folder now, and you build up this massive dossier now of information. So the point is, if the British are going to go on a counterattack, and go in to arrest various people, they know exactly who they're looking for. They know all the names and all the addresses, and they're the key people. So I say the RIC are being targeted on the ground, but that isn't. You really need to cut the head off the snake, as it were, if you want this to really make the British, as it were, blind in the countryside. And what Collins will do, I say this is why he's a kind of spy master. He recruits various people, various sympathisers, lots of informers, including some so there's lots of lower level people. He has typists and people on board and all kinds of things who were in Dublin Castle or in Brunswick Street, the police headquarters there. But he manages to recruit a number of key people, two of which are these two figures here, Ned Broy and David Nelligan. And I say Nelligan in the castle and Broy himself, who's he works for the Dublin G Division, and he's on Collins's side. So he let Collins know everything that's going on, copy files, reports that they're getting through, and get a typist on board and you copy them. Famously, I think this is in the Michael Collins film, Broy gets him actually into the archive so he can check through and see all the files on him and all these other people now. And he just realizes just how incredibly, this is pre-computer age, it really is though, amazing how much information they've got on every single sort of activist in the movement. So what he's trying to do now is intercept, I say, these orders, as it were, to military units in the provinces. Or inform those in the provinces now, or there's a roundup coming next Tuesday or something. Make sure you're not at home. So it allows you to avoid capture, allows them to plan for more effective kind of operations. So I say that's Collins's role. It's a very unique kind of role. We have these kind of intelligence people increasingly in the IRA in the provinces as well, but Collins is very much the kind of mastermind of all this. And, when you think about modern terrorism, if we can think about, as with the development of modern terrorism, Collins will be studied by, many of the sort of great, guerrilla fighters or terrorists or whatever way you want to define them over the years. They all look to Collins, people like, Mao Zedong and so on, Collins, and Vietnam, all these Vietnamese people look at Collins. It's how to run, as it were, an insurgency. And again, so he's very important in that sense. He's very modern. It's a very modern form of, I say, a terrorist kind of campaign. And people have looked for a long time to understand exactly why that's the case. Now, I have a particular theory, which other people have kind of hinted at, in the sense of Collins's favourite book. Well, he's in London, remember, he's working in these financial institutions and the post office and all that. His favourite book is this, The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton. You can see it's published in 1908. He's 18. You can imagine he getting excited by reading this. And I don't know if anyone has ever read this. I don't want to spoil the plot for you completely. But basically what it's about is about a group of us anarchist plotters. And it's all about secrecy. And each one of them has a code name named after a day of the week. So there's 7 in total. Sunday is in charge of it all. And eventually one guy gets the police now, when Thursday dies, member of this anarchist cell, they employ the hero, as it were, of the novel as a police informer, and he goes along to these secret meetings and so on. And it's a very funny, it's a very tongue-in-cheek book because it's G.K. Chesterton. It's a wonderful read if you've got a chance to read it. What happens at the end, spoiler alert, but the funny thing is that it turns out that everyone, all of the conspirators, they're all police informers except the leader. Every one of them has been employed by the police. So he loves this. He gets carried away with it. Here's a quote from the book. And there is Collins kind of famously on his bike, as you can see. So this is from Chesterton. Originally, of course, we met in a cell underground, just as your branch does. So he's talking, let's say, to another member of the little cell. Then Sunday made us take a private room at an ordinary restaurant. He said that if you didn't seem to be hiding, nobody hunted you out. Well, he's the only man on earth I know, but sometimes I really think that his huge brain is going a little mad in its old age. For now we flaunt ourselves before the public. We have our breakfast on a balcony, if you please, overlooking Leicester Square. And that's very much Collins' idea. Just go about on his bike, hide in plain sight. in that sense. So I think there's something certainly in that. I think, if you want to try and trace this, because it is a remarkable kind of new way of fighting an asymmetrical war. Usually you can imagine the guerrilla warfare thing is one aspect of this, but Collins is, as to say, something very unique. And really, in that sense, when you talk about Collins, the difference between Collins, and please don't take out the ethical side of this, I'm talking about in terms of organisation or the way he operates. Collins operates far more like a kind of mafia boss. That's how he's working this. So he's far less, as it were, like Che Guevara or something, with his guerrilla fighters. That's not how he's fighting this war. He's far more like Tony Soprano, really, as this mafia boss with his sort of group of lieutenants. And what he will do is, I say, eventually, he will create around him a group of dedicated full-time assassins who will eventually be carrying out killings of people who are getting too close, as it were. People who have been warned off, as it were. You're being warned now to stop investigating, whatever it might be. It could be a front business they've got. Or it could be arms imports that they're bringing in, all kinds of dodgy deals, or Republican money in bank accounts and things. They're warning these people off, and they carry on. Then often end up being shot, and Collins will be doing that. So I say it is rather like the kind of mafia kind of feel. The focus of Collins is therefore it's on secrecy, it's on very strict discipline. When you think about the volunteers in the countryside, they're still organised on kind of British military lines. They've got battalions and companies and all that stuff, hundreds of men. And most of these, remember, the IRA itself as an organisation, on paper, the IRA, I suppose, has 60 or 70,000 members, but most of these people aren't willing to engage in violence. That's the fact of the matter. There's probably only 15,000 of them, we'd say, who are actually active, who are actually doing anything. And even, you have to hone that down further, as it were, to say there's only 2,000 or 3,000 of them who are really, as I say, prepared to do the killing, if I can put it rather bluntly. I say these are these elites all over Ireland, hardcore and so on of men. But Collins, I say, is doing something unique, and he creates a small group now. All of them volunteer, so as in they volunteer for the role. Which is called the Squad. Most of them now are single men. This is one of the caveats, as it were. You have to. They don't have families or wives or anything. Very young as well, in the early 20s at the oldest, from inner city Dublin. So no family or work commitments or anything like that. They're going to be full time now, assassins. Originally, there's only 5 members of the Squad, but it eventually grows and they add more people in, and there's some more members of the Squad there. And to around a dozen, it becomes known, this is called a nickname develops, of the 12 Apostles. So, I'd say, when the IRA, what you've got is, and we'll talk more about this as we talk about the development of the campaign, but I'd say, there's lots of grey areas in it. There's lots of people in it. There's very few people actually doing anything. So you might be in the 15,000, as it were, but you're not actually killing anyone. You might be hiding a gun or something, or on lookout duty or whatever. There's only a very small amount of the elite, the guerrillas, as it were, who are the ones who really do the killing. And I say these are the elite. Collins does not want a big organisation with all these, I say, sort of fellow travellers and so on. He wants full-time committed revolutionaries. And these guys are, I say, they are full-time, they're paid. He pays them £4, 10 shillings a week, which isn't a bad wage to be part of this. And they take their orders directly and unquestioningly from Collins and no one else. Collins is their only contact. They're forbidden from discussing their activities with anyone at all, including other members of the IRA. So they can't go down chatting away and say, oh, we're doing this, what are you doing out there in Cork or something? And Collins himself rules these people with a rod of iron. Collins is a very, very tough man. Many of them kind of testify, actually, they were more scared of coming back to Collins with an assassination not done, if they'd not got the guy or whatever, because the hell he'd give them, rather than being they were less scared about actually, the grisly act of killing someone. And what they'd do is they'd wait now. And then when the time came, Collins would send out the call, and they'd assemble together now in, say, the basements of various hotels and boarding houses in Dublin. One of these most famously is this, Vaughan's Hotel in Parnell Square. So they gather together there, and it's in these kind of anonymous buildings that they're given then a name and address, sometimes maybe a photograph, often at the last minute now, and they're sent off then to do their grisly work. They're never told who they were killing, why they're killing them, what they've done wrong. This is all kept in Collins's own head, and he's obviously decided the net is closing, or this person's getting too close. We've given him a warning. He has to be done away with. So now I'm just going to show you now a memory from one of these. This is Vinnie Byrne, who was very young at the time, and he becomes one of Collins's assassins, lives for a long, long time. And just a little bit of film of Vinnie Byrne now actually taking part, and well, recalling actually one of his parts in these assassinations. So I'll just stick this on here.
When you joined the squad, you weren't just going to join and fall in behind the fellow and say, I'm a member of the squad. You had to set yourself, the man in charge, to say, this is your job now, get him. And they'd be all round far away, and maybe one man would be with you, and there's walking, coming along, and when you get him cleared of the traffic, let him have it, then run like hell.
For the first time since that morning almost 70 years before, Vinnie Byrne, the last surviving member of the 12 Apostles, came with me to the house where he had executed 2 of those officers. The building now houses an insurance company. He and the other members of his group had attended Mass together in Westland Road Church, and then walked less than a mile to number 38 Upper Mount Street. At exactly 9 o'clock, he knocked on the hall door. The maid opened the door. Vinnie Byrne said he had an important message for one of the officers. The maid knew something was amiss and tried to shut the door, but they pushed past her and demanded to know where the officers were sleeping. She indicated the front room and a room at the back of the house. When one section rushed into the front room through the adjoining one, the officer in the bed, which stood before this fireplace, reached under his pillow for a revolver, but quickly changed his mind. They bundled him down to the room of his colleague, a room which would now be the death chamber. Both men were made to stand on the bed up against the wall.
You 2 men have been sentenced to death, and I come over here to carry out that sentence. The Lord have mercy on your souls. And the shooting took place. Now we got out of the house as quick as we could.
So there you can see, there's Vinnie Byrne there, and here he is now as a young man, as part of the squad, recalling the nature of what they're doing, which is, I say, going out and shooting people. Anne Dolan's written about this, and she talks about, most of these people are being shot in their pajamas, in their bedrooms, eating their breakfast or whatever. I say it has a real mafia kind of feel to what they're doing. Now, so the point about Collins, and here's an interesting comparison as well with what's going on in the provinces. These men aren't setting out to kill, as it were, as many British personnel as possible. So, in the provinces, it's like, it would be just opportunism. The chance arises. Oh, there's a lone policeman there wandering around, without his mate or whatever. Let's have a go. That isn't what he's doing. Collins himself is actually very restrained in terms of how he's operating. Every attack he orders has a purpose. And as with his financial dealings, he hates waste of any kind, Collins. He would carefully kind of weigh the propaganda implications of the attacks. He would establish dossiers on targets, have them followed home, getting to know their routines and so on. Before then, he decides that they're going to be targeted. And I say, but when he does act, he makes a decision to kill. He's absolutely ruthless. He never wavers. And I say they will be targeting, firstly in particular, members of this Dublin G division. And remember, I say he has all these spies and informers and so on within the police department, within the castle, so he knows who these people are. So the squad is really kind of Collins's blunt weapon, if you like, in his armoury. The real strength of his activities lays, though, in his rather audacious intelligence gathering. Because what he actually does is he tries to make up a similar kind of sort of archive to what the authorities have. He has a similar set of files, and what they do is it was an innocent looking office which they rent in Crow Street in Dublin, which is quite close to Dublin Castle. And what they do is they set it up as if it's just a normal office, normal insurance office. And basically these people who work for him come to work as if they're just going to, 9 to 5, and they just roll in with a bit of lunch and stuff. And the front of it, as I say, is all very, very respectable. But behind the scenes, as it's masquerading as his city centre office, members of Collins's intelligence department now, I say they keep regular hours to allay suspicion, particularly under the guiding hand of this man here, Liam Tobin, who's 24 years old at the time when this is going on. And him and his staff now assemble files of all the key members of the British establishment and the British military who are going to end up being posted to Ireland. It's incredibly boring work, but it's very, very important. So they trawl through now society directories, find out the names and addresses of key people. Remember, this is the age where people used to print that kind of thing in the newspapers as well. Who they're related to, where they eat, whether, what their daily routines are, and so on. And also, they collect the names of all the people employed as part of the bureaucracy in Ireland, especially those inside Dublin Castle, where they would often work on the next stage, turning them to the Republican side. So people who may be a bit, he might be sympathetic. What's he doing? Who does he know? What's his relations with such and such? And then you can move and maybe turn them. And it's very successful on many occasions. According to Tobin tells us that Collins has dozens and dozens of officials at every level in the civil service working for him. And it is kind of incredible the way this works. So what you'll often have, say, is military officers will be posted to Ireland. As things escalate, they'll send over more and more people now. Maybe from MI5 or some new member of British military intelligence will go over. And I say, these will be announced. You get these announcements in the press to say such and such, Captain such and such has been posted to Dublin. We'll be leaving on the Sunday afternoon steamer. It's amazing when you think about the way we live, how secret our lives are, or meant to be. And what they would do is, they'd find that information out, and they would often, and this is remarkable use of intelligence, they would go down to the dock when this boat's about to arrive, and this guy steps off the boat. They know who he is, and you go up to him, say, with a camera, and say, "Welcome to Dublin." Take a photograph of him. "Welcome to Dublin." And say to him, if you want this photograph, I hope you have a nice stay here. But here's the address where you can get a print of this. It happens with a lot of tourists. You probably happen to yourself. Of course, the address is fake. There's no one actually at the end of it. But they've got the photograph now, and then they'll print the photograph and they'll go in the file. And this is how you develop these kind of dossiers. It really is kind of incredibly revolutionary for its time when you think about this. So what you've got with Collins, as I say, is, and we'll talk more of what Collins did when we talk about Bloody Sunday and so on later on, but Collins is developing a new and multifaceted way of conducting a revolutionary insurrection. It's very, very new. And I say all his various roles, Minister of Finance, Director of Intelligence, Head of the Eye, all these different things. He's also, of course, Collins, creating a formidable alternative power base, if you like, to that of the political side of the movement. Now, Collins is not, as you'll often hear, the head of the IRA or something, the leader of the IRA, not at all. Collins' only role in the IRA is, as I say, a director of intelligence, but he is a very formidable and very powerful figure in it. And it's certainly true that his rather unique way of fighting war with these assassinations and this intelligent work is absolutely crucial in terms of undermining the British efforts to destroy the IRA and the volunteer movement. Okay, so that's just a few words there on Collins and, I say, the uniqueness of what he's doing. Okay, everyone, so take care and I'll see you all next time.